Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be making a thank you card based on one of my favorite card layouts that I use in my card making. I'm going to begin by taking craft cardstock and patterned paper from Studio Calico for their Autumn Press collection. I picked this up at Tuesday morning and I love the patterns and the subtle colors. I'm going to begin by folding the craft cardstock in half to create an A2 size card, and I am going to use my bone folder to crease it down to create a sharp, crisp edge. Now that I have done this, I'm going to take my corner chomper by We Are Memory Keepers and I'm going to use the 1/2 inch round option to round all the corners of my card base. Once this has been done, I'm going to take the pattern paper I have cut down so that it is slightly shorter than the card base, and I'm going to round the corners as well. And so once this has been completed, I'm going to use my ATG by Scotch and I'm going to adhere it to the card base. I like using this adhesive because it's strong and a little goes a long way. Just be careful to line it up perfectly because if you try to peel it back to fix your mistakes, it will tear your paper. I can move on to the frame. So I have die cut a piece of vellum and a circular frame out of white cardstock using my Big Shot machine, and I'm going to emboss on this. So instead of using a powder bag, I'm going to make my own tool, and so I'm going to use a little bit of baby powder on the vellum and smooth it around with this cheap paintbrush in order to get rid of the static so my embossing will go on nicely. You could use a powder bag, but I like using my own little tool. So I'm going to be using the Many Thanks stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. It is one of my favorites, and it has a lot of really elegant thank you stamps that would look great on the outside or the inside of a card. So I'm going to be taking the largest thank you in the cursive script, and I'm going to adhere this to my block and stamp it using a watermark ink pad. So I'm going to be using the Versamark pad for this. So this is just a sticky ink that the embossing powder will adhere to nicely. Once this has been stamped, I am ready to use my embossing powder, and you can see how sticky it is, and so it will hold the powder nicely. So I'm going to use a coffee filter thanks to a tip I learned from Jennifer McGuire, and I'm going to use the Liquid Platinum embossing powder by Ranger. It's a nice warm silver color, and so I'm going to use a coffee filter to catch the powder when it falls. So I'm going to tap it on, and you can see it's going to emboss pretty cleanly. Sometimes, however, depending on what powder tool you use or if you don't, the powder will stick to places you don't want it to. So what I like to do is take a small paintbrush, and you can use this to get rid of some of the flecks of embossing powder that have stuck where you don't want them to. And then you can just flick it off and the powder should fall. I'm now going to emboss it using my heat tool by Martha Stewart and wait for the powder to melt. Now that the powder has melted, I am ready to adhere the vellum to my frame. So I'm using this white frame again, and I'm going to be using Glossy Accents by Ranger as my adhesive, and it's great for making dimensionals, but it's also good for adhering paper. So I'm going to adhere it to the back of the frame and press it down tightly so the vellum is nice and flat. Once I have done this, I'm ready to adhere this to my card. So I'm going to center it and use the same Glossy Accents to adhere this to my card base. I'm making sure to press this down well so that the vellum will lay flat on my card, because it does warp a little when you heat emboss it. Using a thicker vellum, however, will help prevent some of this warping. So now it is adhered to the back of my card, and I'm ready to add the nice dimensional pieces to the bottom of my card. So for this, I'm going to be taking my craft knife and I'm going to be making a slit in the fold of the card. And so I'm going to cut onto my craft mat so I don't cut the countertop, and I'm going to cut right in the fold. So once I have done this, it is ready to add my twine. But in order to give it enough space, I'm going to take my craft knife and wiggle it in the slit in order to make it a little wider. So now I'm going to take a jute rope twine that I picked up at the dollar spot at Target actually, and I'm going to use this to wrap around the bottom of my card and tie a bow. So what I'm going to do is cut enough twine so that I can wrap it around twice and then have enough left over to tie a bow on top of the twine. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to stick it through the slit and wrap it around the front of my card. Now that I have the bottom two layers of the twine lined up, I'm going to tie a bow at the top, making sure it's center with my sentiment, and making sure to pull it tightly so that the twine doesn't gape on the sides of the card or on the back or the front. So once you tie this, you can play around with the size of the bow so that it fits your card or your style. And so I like my bows to be a little on the smaller side. So this is what I ended up with. Now I could leave the card as is, but I would like to add a little more embellishment to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a white gel pen and I'm going to add faux stitching to the sides of my card. So I'm going to go around the entire length of the card to give it another pop of the white color we see in the frame. So once this is done, I could leave it like this, but I really like to finish my cards off so that they're finished in the front and the back. So I'm going to go around the back of my card and add the same faux stitching you see on the front. It ties together the white in the frame and in the pattern nicely. So once I have finished that, I have completed my card and it is ready to give away. Thank you for checking out my card tutorial today, and if you would like to see more, you can find me at my blog at papercraftingbyg.blogspot.com or over on Instagram at papercraftingbyg.